All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight to it then. This is a conversation on global tourism with the CEO of Rotana Hotels, Philip Barnes. Please give him a warm round of applause. Philip, the world is changing rapidly, and it feels like it's always on the cusp of a new scandal, a new radical shift, pending the tweets and which side of the bed the US president woke up on, Donald Trump. And now it seems we're moving a little bit maybe towards reconciliation with China. But there is that cloud that still hangs over the global economy, and especially in the United States. You would have seen the Airbnb numbers and sort of what we heard from Delta. We heard from STR earlier, and sort of the numbers within the region that we are consolidating above pre-pandemic levels. And there are nuances to that. But I want you to kind of top-line view again of where we are today as far as you can tell for global tourism.
I am very optimistic about tourism as a whole. If you look at 2024, I think the numbers are something like $9 trillion that focused on tourism in 2024, which is about 9% of global GDP. So, and when you look at it, yes, there are swings and roundabouts, as you said. The US right now is suffering from a decline in tourism for a variety of reasons, many of which you just touched on. But there are other parts of the world that continue to be very resilient and very strong. The UAE is a prime example of it, where we have not seen any change in demand. And all the markets that basically we deal with, Russia, Germany, the UK, etc., continue to be very, very strong. Now, I'm one of those people, I've been through enough recessions and challenges that I've always got one eye over the shoulder to see what's actually happening in the rearview mirror. But there's nothing at this point in time that I've seen, and there's nothing that our key partners have seen that gives them any cause for concern. So I think we're sort of in a bit of a bubble, and I think that's what's happened to the world, is that you get these bubbles of places where demand is still strong, and then you get these other areas due to a variety of reasons. And I was just talking to somebody else about this. I was in the UK when, for example, the government decided to change the approach to VAT on shopping. And all of a sudden, there was a decline in retail, decline in tourism, decline in restaurants across the board. I mean, a simple government policy can make a significant difference. So in the world in which we live, I think we've all sort of kind of got used to these bumps and ups and downs.
So where are you seeing particular strength, and where are you seeing a little bit of weakness then? I mean, what's sort of the main indicator?
Well, my weakest areas are the easiest ones to address right now. They would be in Istanbul as a result of what's going on there. They're in Beirut as a result of the continuing challenges that they've had, although at the same time, I will say to you that I see Beirut actually having signs of cautious optimism for the summer. Jordan tends to follow Beirut, therefore it's in a similar situation. But other than that, the UAE, I mean, particularly so far this year, both the Northern Emirates, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi have all been very strong, in fact, stronger than last year. So again, it's a mixed picture.
Is there any need to sort of review how we think about customers? Because if you think back to COVID, it sort of sent shockwaves across the tourism industry. And operators and owners and investors, a lot of them had to reinvent how they do business and what their value proposition is. What I'm trying to get at is whether the turbulence we've seen so far this year and the pressure that consumers are facing as well with higher costs as a result of these frictions may lead to another wave of that kind of rethink, or you think that's a step too far?
There's never a point in time where I ever stop and think, okay, all is good in the world. I mean, everything is changing constantly. When you talk about the customer and what the customer wants and what the customer's looking for, that is also constantly changing. Hotels, restaurants, everybody needs to evolve in accordance with the demands that's happening with the consumer. I think the most difficult thing for everybody in every industry is to recognize the fact that change is something that is, if you don't embrace it, it will be forced upon you. So as the consumer changes, so we need to change. But I do think there's an awful lot to be said for particularly this part of the world, and I've said this on many occasions. If you are accessing the UAE or you're accessing Saudi as a visitor, both governments have made it very easy now in ways that, as we were talking about before, it wasn't 5 years ago. Coming into Saudi today, getting a visa to come to Saudi today is so easy. And arrival at the airport is fast, it's efficient. You know, these are the things that matter to people. When you talk to people about travel globally, they want ease of access, they want safety, they want cleanliness, they want hygiene, and these are the things that in this part of the world are coming to the forefront in a very big way. And then you add in, as I talked about Saudi, in terms of the history, in terms of the culture of the country, which has not necessarily been available to the broader spectrum or not even understood. As I mentioned to you, you know, as we were coming on, when a top luxury travel advisor from New York tells me that his focus is the Red Sea because he sees that as a major destination for US tourism, that tells you how the world is changing.
Philip, I look at the Bloomberg dollar index, it's down 6.5% year to date, and I'm wondering, again, keeping in mind that you have a portfolio of hotels across various geographies, is a weaker greenback a net positive or a net negative? Because yes, for international travelers coming from ex-US countries, it's going to be cheaper to come to places like Dubai. But again, it's much more complicated. Have you been able to quantify that? How do you game that out?
The major markets that we deal with are places like the UK, Germany, Russia. Let's put Russia on one side. But those other markets, European markets, yes, they will be influenced by the strength of the dollar. Right, as you know, in this part of the world. But so it's been to our benefit at this point in time that the dollar has been weaker. But there's also a side of me that says that travel has become, it's no longer a luxury. It's a sense of entitlement, and people are going to travel regardless. Right. So yes, if there's a fluctuation in currency, it may have an effect if it's significant enough to do so. Right. They're more concerned about airfares, hotel prices, restaurant prices, etc., in the destination than they're going to, and probably paying less attention to the currency.
What are the priorities at Rotana at the moment when it comes to, you know, your capex, when it comes to expansion?
Well, as I always say to people, we're a management company, so we manage on behalf of owners. So we are constantly working with our owners, and our ownership relationships are really critically important to us, because when we're talking to owners about capex investments or renovations, whatever it may be, it is to protect the asset. So we're acting on behalf of the owners, and it's not therefore a question of what we'd like to do. It's a question of what we need to do to stay competitive and to stay strong in the marketplace and deliver the results that they're looking for. But the needs of capex are predominantly the owners. I mean, we have our own capex as a small company that we need to work on in terms of keeping the management company going and in terms of the investments we need to make on technology, et cetera, et cetera. But it's small compared to the needs of the hotels.
You also have 11 hotels, I believe, in the pipeline for the kingdom.
Yes.
How is the timeline looking? Could you talk to us a bit more about you know, when we could see those fully up and running?
Some of them will be very quick. Some of them I expect to actually come on stream this year. I'm thinking of 2 right now off the top of my head. And don't ask me to tell you which ones they are, because of course if I tell you, that won't happen, right? So, but there's at least 2 that I'm thinking of right now, and then there's another 3 that I can see following very quickly also next year. It'll be within the next 3 to 4 years that those will come on. But our goal, quite honestly, is that's one side of the equation. We're looking to add into that. So we're looking to add to our development stream in the kingdom as a whole. To see how far, I mean, really, I'd like to see us with the same number of hotels in Saudi that we have in the UAE, which is around the 40, 45 mark. I hope my development guys are listening right now.
40, 45?
Yeah,
wow.
Because I think there's an opportunity for us. We're a homegrown brand. There's a comfort with us. We grew up in this region, we were born in this region, we've developed in this region, and I think there's a familiarity and a comfort with that that gives us, dare I say it, an advantage over many of our competitors in that people know that we understand the region. They understand, I mean, maybe not me personally, but I've got a lot of people who really understand how to put on an iftar, for example, in a hotel, because it's our DNA. And our DNA is in that hospitality that comes from this region, which is very different.
Closing question. I've been asking this question to Rotana for over 10 years. And it's a question related to whether you intend to go IPO. Is that something you're looking at the moment? I know I'm not going to, year in, year out, it's the same answer. But, from a journalistic perspective, I've got to do my bit. I've got to try. And, there are more companies going public in the UAE. And who knows? There might be like a Rotana ticker people want to pick up on and they help you with your expansion, right?
Look, I've been ducking and weaving that question all day, so I'm going to continue to do so right now. What I will say to you is what I have said to everybody else. We're a homegrown company. We're owned predominantly by the Al Nawais family. Until the chairman walks into my office and says, Phil, we're doing an IPO, I'm not going to respond in any way, shape, or form. And what I will say is that for him, Rotana, it's really important that we stay a homegrown brand, and he wants to retain that level of control. And I think that, if anything, probably answers the question better than any other. Right?
Yeah, quite a few families that feel the same way, that's for sure, who don't want to rush into any IPO, and they're quite happy with the way things are set up, and they're very successful. Philip, thank you so much.
Very
for
welcome.
the tour, for reflecting on global tourism, but also giving us a bit of insight in terms of what's happening at Rotana. A real pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right.